All right. We got Andrue McElhaney here.
All righty.
Correctly. McElhaney.
McElheny, yeah.
McElhaney. Mac. Oh, it's a Mac.
It's a Mac.
McElhaney. Andrew McElhaney. Yeah. You want to introduce yourself, first of all?
Yeah, so I'm Andrew McElheny. I'm a senior solution architect at Elastic. Been with the company for 5 years now. Prior to that, active duty Navy for 8 years. I was IT by trade. Spent my last 4 years and some change just doing Navy cyber protection team out of Hawaii, and really kind of got my passion started back in 2011. When the job I wanted, which was originally to be a corpsman, go into the medical field. And they're like, you got to wait a year and a half. So I said, what else you got? They asked me, what's your hobby? I said, I play video games on the weekend. And they gave me computers. And that's kind of how my journey got started here. So for over a decade now, I've been, into computers, technology, trying to make things better.
Awesome. So we are going to talk about, in some ways, your journey from going from not knowing, knowing video games to being an Elastic expert, right? And how that was for you and some things that would help other organizations and as well. Training. You have a passion of training that I see few people have. Where does this come from and why do you have it?
Man. So to get started with the training, I think the biggest thing is there's so much information out there. It's hard to find that starting point, something that's really going to drive you in the right direction. Actually, I think so. When I signed on to join the Navy, right? Originally, I signed on 4-year contract, and they said, "Hey, would you like to do 2 more years for more training?" I was like, "Absolutely." So just having that field specific knowledge that I was going to get into and dive deeper, that's kind of what started it off. But as I kind of progressed through my career in the Navy, the one thing I noticed was a lot of the budget got spent on the equipment, the mission systems, right? And it was, if we have training money left over, it would go to training. But when you have teams that are, 40 plus people, how do you divvy that out fairly, right? So it was a little bit more of a challenge. So I think it was about a year into my time out in Hawaii. We actually had a team called the Cyber Protection Training Team. However I ended up falling into it, I had a lot of great mentors too. They're like, we're going to put you on this. And one of our challenges was the kits that we would use to deploy as an analyst, right? The cyber capabilities that we'd go and employ. It took a while to rebuild those kits after each mission, right? And reset it back to a baseline standard. And there was only maybe 4 to 6 people who knew how to do that. So coming from an IT background, they're like, hey, we want you to get in there, start learning how to do this, right? So that was definitely a process. And then, one of my mentors out in Hawaii, amazing guy, he challenged me. He said, I want you to be able to rebuild this thing in less than 2 hours. And I'm like, man, that is going to be fun, but a challenge, right? So we actually dedicated one of our kits to just learning, right? Build it up, tear it down, build it up, tear it down. And I gotta say, that's probably one of the most beneficial things for training is that practical hands-on experience with your stuff, right? There's a lot of training out there that's very generic, getting started. Sometimes you're behind paywalls or other solutions, but just having that capability to dive in and say, I can come in every day, tear this thing apart, and build it back up. It's great for that muscle memory. It's great for learning the configurations at a deeper level. And also, once we got that done, we realized we need documentation on how to do this as well. So it's a mix of the training, the documentation coming together to support the overall project. And this doesn't just apply to like kits, right? This is enterprise networks. The more you understand how the back end works, the more efficiently you can tune it and optimize it for going into the future. So that's how I got started. I got tired of the phone calls at 11, 12 o'clock at night. Hey, the kit's not working. How do we fix it? And so I'm, either driving in or remotely calling in saying, hey, do these troubleshooting steps. So we took it a step further that before any of our teams would deploy, they would actually come sit down with me for a week, that entire team that was going to deploy, and we would walk them through that entire system from building it up from scratch to getting data in and then how to analyze that data. So that's really where my passion for the training got started, right? Was just seeing how much more efficiently the team could work and that there wasn't a single person being called at, that 11, 12 o'clock at night to troubleshoot it, but everybody had that knowledge that we got the documentation, but that hands-on repetitive experience. And I would have them build it up with the documentation, say, hey, go grab lunch. And while they're out at lunch, I would make changes in there that would mess the entire system up. And the goal was for them to come back and say, okay, retest everything. Is everything still working right? And I would do that every day. I would get a little tricky. Some days I wouldn't do anything at all, right? Maybe unplug it, get an Ethernet cable, whatever it may be, just to see if they would look through everything. And that to me is kind of the greatest joy, is just seeing these people that I worked with improve to that level where, sometimes they don't need you anymore, it feels like, but in a good way. So that's really where my passion of training kind of started. And then, like I mentioned, I started Elastic 5 years ago. I was using it then, I'm still using it now. So I'm getting close to a decade of using the Elastic product. And the biggest thing for me in getting started, one, learning Linux, right? I love deploying Elastic on Linux. It's probably the easiest and most straightforward way. Things are changing towards containers, Kubernetes, Docker now, so that'll have to change a little bit, but I could just spin up a VM of Elastic and start playing with it. That was really the thing, is you don't need a whole lot of resources to get started. You got the cloud trials now. But for me being in disconnected networks, the VM was the closest thing I had because I can turn off the internet and do everything.
So many thoughts. Let me unpack a few things here. One, I mean, your comment of like training the future people. Someone really smart to me said, hire people who can take over your job. Like, I think that's a great way to look at that, right? Like, the more people you have to do that, the more you can do other things as well.
Yeah. And I think it gives you that ability, once you train that future generation to take your job, it's not that you become obsolete. It's now I have free time to go back into this mode to learn something else I want to focus on. And then I start that process over.
And I think that's to my next point as well, is what you brought up is interesting. You're talking about training, but I would argue what you built was consistency. You build a consistent system. It's way easier to train someone on a consistent system and be an expert and figure it out. And you got to be an expert and figure it out. And you got to be an expert and figure it out. No, this is the thing we're going to train you on. This is what we built for you. That in order to do that requires the ability to have people who you can depend on, that you can start building that consistency. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what you're saying there.
No, you're spot on there, and it really becomes a think tank at that point too, right? Like as you're building that consistency, you don't always have all the answers, right? And having trained a lot of people over the years, it's one of those things that comes down to, we could actually do this even faster or better by doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, I didn't think about that as I was training, because my background of how I got started versus how they got started is different. So they have different ways of looking at things, different insights to push it even further into a direction we wanted to go to. To your point, yeah, absolutely. I think it's really beneficial just to have that consistency, but also you're building a growth way of people optimizing what you kind of build a foundation for.
And it doesn't matter what that foundation is. There's 15 ways to skin a cat. Choose one.
Like the one that, feels the most natural to you, I would say, is the easiest way. There's definitely times where I've touched technology that was so foreign to me, and I had to take a step back and say, the documentation, the way they're telling me to do it, doesn't necessarily make the most sense to me. But if I approach these areas a little bit differently, I can make changes that actually works and I can still get the same end result.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Let's focus in on Elastic here. So I think this is what you were going towards before I cut you off there. Learning Elastic over the last 10 years. Someone who has never seen Elastic, very interested in it. They want to transition their career, or maybe even an organization that wants to move towards Elastic. What is a good training model? What are some good things to bring up?
Man, that's a great question. And I'm gonna give one of the old time Elastic answers. It depends, right?
Yes.
So it's really different approaches that you can take, and I think it comes down to the environment you're working in. I would say one of the easiest ways now to get started is do the free cloud trials, right? You don't have to worry as much about building up the product, so you can do the commercial cloud trial or the, gov cloud trials. That way it's more focused on getting the data in and figuring out the best way to maximize the data that you need and organizing it in a fashion that makes the most sense, right? That's one part of the problem is I can go to a tool, like Elastic, but until I test it and see the functionality for myself, it's like that shiny object that people dangle in front of you, right? Um, so I think that's the easiest way to get started. Now, from my experience, right, and really getting into the weeds, I did it all self-managed, right? So air-gapped environment, no internet, whatever it may be, and having to move the files on there, that's going to give you that back-end experience that you need to troubleshoot those systems moving forward in certain environments. And when you get into that level of effort, you're going to break things. There's no way around it. Eventually, something's going to break. But if I just did the cloud trials and I never got into the heart of the system, I wouldn't have learned the ways to move around the system, navigate the system to truly find the issues that were being caused. So I would always say, get in there, spin it up for yourself in a VM. I'm still a big VM person to this day because it's the best way to test and evaluate. Now, when it comes to training a team, there's no substitution for that hands-on, right? Building that repetitive kind of movement going forward, like we talked about earlier when I was building out those kits. It's just getting them in that motion, getting that muscle memory there. Like having the dev environments now is absolutely fantastic for building out new technologies and stuff, but there needs to be a level of capabilities where the people that are going to be using it can go in, day out if they needed to spin it up, play with it, build it, break it, tear it down, and redo that because that muscle memory in the long run, the methodologies and how they think of executing, whether it's building Elastic or some integrations into it, that's really where they're going to get most of the benefit from.
You brought up earlier, I'm going to bring up another topic here, the DevOps world, as versions are transitioning so fast.
Yes.
Old way to train is it's changing as well. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, how fast-paced things are. I mean, even here at Elastic, right, pushing updates every 6 to 8 weeks. That's a lot to stay on top of. DevOps it's going to be the way of the future. At some point, everything is going to go containerized because you can use the resources you have more efficiently. And then, that transition over to cloud too, so you don't have to have the actual hardware. It's definitely going to change, but I think, one thing is moving it into the cloud is going to be a great thing, especially from a DevOps, but also a training perspective, because you can kind of build these mini environments, one for developing, one for training, that are going to be huge. And if you automate all of that using the DevOps methodology to build up small little training ranges for people within your environments, that's a win. But at the same time, as development is pushing forward really quickly, you got to make sure your users are still getting the most value out of it. So maybe it's your development range, you clone it and you give it to these people who are wanting to train on it, because that's how you're going to find things that maybe you can improve on or something that's broken that needs to be fixed, right?
Mhm.
So I think it goes hand in hand is, yes, we're developing this great technology, but if nobody uses it because they don't know how to, whether it's a lack of training, awareness, whatever the capability may be, then we're kind of, what are we building it for? I guess is how I would think about it.
Is that more effort, or like how much more effort is that to train in that way?
Man, that is a good question that I don't know if I have an answer to that one. I guess it would be depending on how big that development environment is and how accurate it is to the end product, right?
Good point. What new muscle motions and resources are needed for that, and what can we do away with then?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits that I've seen is the orchestration and automation, right? I think that's one of the biggest things that can make spinning up those resources really easily. Like your Terraforms of the world, your Ansibles, your Chefs, your Puppets, being able to use those types of technology to spin things up quickly and tear them down. I think getting even the end users into that type of environment where they can spin it up really quickly, tear it down really quickly, or just understand what's being done in the background is going to help them so much in the future, whether they go more cyber role or general IT, or even maybe they transition to DevOps, right? It opens up more paths for opportunities, but it also helps close and bridge those gaps that they currently have.
I mean, you're saying even more consistency. That's the resource
Yeah,
that needs to be built.
exactly. And not everybody's environment is going to be the same, right? So really kind of sampling that at a fundamental level is going to help them. Again, more you understand that back end, even from a troubleshooting purpose, if you move to a different area and the network's slightly different, but the back end is similar, you at least have a leg up on getting to know that new environment. And I think that's really kind of helps build that consistency point, even with the training.
I have another question. I'm curious if there's anything I'm missing. When we're looking at an organization and
Mhm.
want to transition an organization to, say, Elastic, we're talking Elastic, right?
Yeah.
What is a good specific, like focusing on Elastic, what would be a good transition plan for a SOC, a Security Operations Center, to transition to Elastic?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. This might have a long answer as well. The biggest thing I can say, if you're looking to transition to Elastic from something else, is just get started with it. Even the basic version that you can download for free, right? Does it have all the bells and whistles initially to get started? No, but that goes back to that point. You need to get the data in and see what it can do. The shiny objects are great, but nobody knows the environment like the people that are running it. But that's going to do two things. That's going to get you started with having people that need to go out and do the research, right? They're going to put it in, they're going to install it, they're going to start getting that experience with it. And the more people you can get experience, the easier that transition is going to be. From an Elastic perspective, we've made it 100 times easier over probably even the last 5 years, right? Um, I think when you and I started, Nathan, we didn't even have a security app capability or SIM capability in Elastic. It was dashboards. We didn't have an easy centralized way of ingesting logs like we do now with Fleet and Agent. It was, hey, there's a specific beat. And then we got a little bit deeper with modules where additional configurations we can turn off and on. But those are the ways where look at the data sources you have. And I would say, one, are you getting all the information that you need currently? If not, the Elastic integrations page is a great way to get started too, right? So spin up a single instance of Elastic, run Fleet with Agent, and start collecting it. See the difference, for yourselves of what it could be. I would say one of the easiest ways, network traffic, right? Having some type of observability into the net flow is a great way to start because you can do that through a span port, a tap on a switch, something like that to start getting the benefits. And then expand it out to things like system metrics and health, right? A lot of people don't collect the system metrics and health, but that's how you really have true visibility into the environments, even from a SOC perspective, right? Very security focused. But at the same time, you can look at things out there like crypto miners, right? That are going to crank up your CPU and GPU utilization. You're going to get a lot of that from a metric perspective as well. So that's kind of how I would say it to get started is just deploy Elastic, even if it's a free one. The nice thing is it comes with a 30-day trial baked into it anyways. That'll give you access to all the features. Start small and then scale up as you go. If you truly find the value, you're going to want to scale, you're going to want to add more data sources until you get to that comfortable point. At the same time, right, this isn't like a one-off thing. There's, billions of downloads of Elastic? There's a lot of people who have used it, so there's a large community out there. I think getting into that area and understanding, we have the Discuss forums, you got Stack Overflow, there's YouTube videos out there that really kind of build that community around a product. And that's where you can even just get started from that point of view as well as, hey, let's watch this video, let's try it out and see what we can do. Go to a local meetup with people. I know Elastic, we host a lot of meetups in a lot of different locations. I'll make a selfless plug. If we don't do one in your area, let us know, right? That's one of the benefits, though, is that community, that group learning. Take the lessons learned, build your own consistency out of it so that you can enable your organization to do what it needs to do. I think I answered the question, but
I mean, you brought up an interesting topic at the end. If you were to restart your journey of learning Elastic, how would it look now? What would you have changed?
man, I probably would start on a newer version. That would definitely be one thing, right?
Yeah.
Having to curl in the license in the past instead of having that drag and drop for the UI is a massive change. I mean, the first thing I would do personally, right? I like to challenge myself by starting in the hardest environment I can. And that's without a doubt to me is going to be those air gapped, disconnected environments. So I would still start there and I would go through the documentation we have on our webpage, right? And it may not work for every environment, but it gives me that starting place. When I started, I was going through probably 20, 30, 40 different Elastic document pages to try to find the answers I was looking for. So now I have that piece that I can actually bring in. Then, if there's a meetup group or somebody, if Elastic Conference is open, just go talk to somebody that's a little bit more technical, start asking questions, right? I think that's the biggest thing is Elastic's, now that I've been here and I know, Elastic's a company that's pretty open to just working with everybody, whether it's our free users and they're curious and they want to kick the tires on things to our customers that are paying for the license. It all comes down to that communication piece is how can we help, fill the gaps in knowledge or help, design around challenges or solutions. And I think to me, going back to the point, I started off by having a kit with 2 different versions of Elastic. I would start over with a single version, the newer ones, because it makes life a lot easier. And the documentation that we have for that most challenging environment, I would start there and then I would probably move over to something easier too, like the cloud. I can just spin it up. I don't have to put a credit card in or anything. So if I can spin it up and play with it and just start seeing what I can do with it, those would be my go-to way. Start hard, go over to the easy, and then find somewhere in the middle that makes the most sense.
I totally see where you're saying with that. I go to the cloud a lot. If I need to figure out something quick, I don't want to spin up an entire massive thing. I want to spin something up for an hour, kill it. Like that's so valuable right there. And our docs are really good at helping you see everything. There's if you're doing air gap on-prem type solution, it there is some really good docs in there. And be honest, there are moments you have to go look hard for them, right? But it's there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where the community comes in. Someone has found it in the past. Someone is going to help you out. Going to those meetings. I mean, so many little side conversations that are happening for sure.
And like I said too, we're not the first ones to have started building with Elastic. There's so many customers out there. It's one of those things like, if I knew there was other teams in the Navy besides me using Elastic at the time, right? The easiest thing is just reach out to Elastic and be like, hey, do you know of anybody else? Because sometimes we're in our own little bubbles that we don't look for those other people within our environment, right? Maybe it's Navy, maybe it's Marines, Air Force, Space Force, whatever it may be, to leverage that other knowledge and those other people. And those other people are probably going to be willing to share their experiences, good and bad, right? We don't want to sugarcoat things. We want people to be comfortable and confident and happy with what they have. And so where else to get that feedback than those other people that are using it?
Yeah, so true. Any other things that I haven't asked about? Any other major topics? I have one more question after that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing I can say for somebody who wants to get into Elastic, again, I've been doing it for almost 10 years now. As you mentioned, training is really my thing, right? Getting started is probably the most challenging thing in any project that you start. But if you can set aside time every day, every other day, I've tried things like learning coding, right? Coding for me is one of the biggest weaknesses I have. And I found that I could do it every day for about a week, and then I got burnout. Start small, spend 30 minutes to an hour a day, but don't do it every day if it doesn't make sense. Push yourself in the ways that's going to be the most beneficial to you, where you can learn, where you can really engage yourself in finding that understanding. If you're just walking through it, it's hard. But if you have a purpose or goal at the end of the day that you want to get to, and you just chip away at it a little bit over time, maybe it's a month, 3 months, you're going to find a lot more value, and a lot more of that information is going to be retained that way.
All right. Great points. Super geeky. I'm thinking of a TCP connection. You say that, where like TCP connection sends one packet and it makes sure that it works, and then it'll send 2 packets, make sure those works, and then it sends 4 packets, and then 8. And if it doesn't work, it goes back to 4 and goes back to 2. Yeah, like that's kind of what you're saying. Like, don't start at 8 packets. TCP or training. Okay. In 20 words or less, 30 words. We'll give you 30. What would you say the summary for training with Elastic, if you were to give them a good elevator pitch, what they should do, how they should get started, what they need, what they should be looking for, everything that we've talked about today, just to summarize today, how would you summarize that in a short time? And I'm going to keep talking and rambling a little bit to give you a little more time to think through this. But yeah, what would you think? What are your thoughts on that right there?
30 words or less. All right, this will be the challenge, but here we go. Start with the project in mind. Understand that having a team is going to build more success. Find your consistency that makes the most sense. And at the end of the day, you're not going to know everything right off the bat. So find that comfort factor as you build that consistency.
That was good.
That's my shortest pitch I can do for it.
Nice job. All right, man. Thanks that was great talking. Until next time, we'll do another topic again, another time.
Sounds great. Thank you.